She wasn't their mother. Not by blood. Not by law. Just a stranger in the snow. With 2 children clinging to her like she was all they had left. He gave her shelter. He didn't ask questions. But when the soldiers came looking for her, she didn't run. She wrapped the kids in red. She stepped outside. And she gave herself up. Not to escape her past, but to protect their future. This isn't about DNA. This is about the moment you choose to be family. The storm had been tearing at the trees since morning. Jonas knew the wind by sound now, each gust like a tired voice howling through bone-dry branches. He sat by the hearth, book open but unread, one hand loosely gripping a mug that had gone cold long ago. Something knocked. Not the wind. Not a branch. A knock. 3 times. He waited. Another knock, softer this time. Then silence. Jonas set the mug down and rose, the old floor creaking beneath his steps. He took the rifle from the rack not loaded and approached the door. When he opened it, the cold didn't rush in. It slid, careful and deliberate, like a predator testing boundaries. They were standing there. The woman first, tall, wrapped in layers of cloth too thin for winter, her skin pale green like frost over moss. Her eyes were darker than the sky behind her, wide but unreadable. In each arm, a child clung to her sides, both human. One boy. One girl. Both silent. Eyes open. Not crying. Just watching. Jonas said nothing. She didn't speak. She just bowed her head. That's what made him move. He stepped aside. No words. No questions. She entered like a shadow, gliding over the threshold with the children still pressed to her. Snow melted where they passed. The girl shivered. The boy didn't. Jonas shut the door. He pointed toward the fireplace. She nodded once and crouched beside it, easing the children down, wrapping them in her coat. Jonas tossed 2 more logs in, stirred the embers, and pulled the blanket from the back of the chair. He laid it near them, but didn't get close. She looked up, just once. Not pleading. Not thankful. Only watchful. He returned to his chair. The book still sat on the table, but he didn't touch it. The fire cracked. Time passed. The girl slept first, curling into the woman's side. The boy followed, hand still clinging to her sleeve. She remained upright, eyes half-lidded, like someone who had not slept in days but couldn't afford to. Jonas asked his first question then. Are they yours? She didn't answer. He didn't ask again. Instead, he brought her water. Left it near her feet. She didn't touch it until he had stepped away. Later, as the moon carved blue lines through the frost-laced window, Jonas heard a sound. Humming. Barely audible. Not a melody. Not even a rhythm. Just the smallest vibration from a voice half buried in exhaustion. He lay in his cot, eyes open, listening. The next morning, they were still there. The girl had crawled closer to the fire. The boy remained in her lap. And the woman Lyrian, he would learn her name much later, sat staring at the wall, arms around them both, like a statue whose only warmth came from memory. He made food. Plain broth. Some root mash. Enough for 4. She didn't eat until the children had. Even then, she only took what was left. When Jonas finally sat at the table across from her, she didn't raise her eyes. But the boy did. Big, dark, and steady. He stared at Jonas with a gaze that didn't blink enough. Not with fear. Not with need. Just with a kind of silence that comes from understanding something no child should have to. Jonas looked away first. He didn't know what this was. He didn't know how she got here, or where the children came from, or what she might bring behind her shadow. But she hadn't asked for anything. She had only stood in the snow, holding them. So for now, he would let her stay. Not because he trusted her, but because the boy hadn't looked away. Snow came every day now. Some mornings it was light, like ash drifting from the sky. Other days it roared, thick and angry, erasing paths as quickly as they were made. But inside the cabin, a rhythm had formed. Lyrian never asked to stay. She simply did. And Jonas never told her to leave. She didn't speak much, only nodded when needed. She swept the floor before he could. Cooked simple food when supplies allowed. She kept the fire alive and the children clean. They clung to her like roots to stone, silent most hours, but never far from her touch. It wasn't until the 3rd week that Jonas noticed the drawings. Scraps of wood, old canvas from storage, even bark flattened and smoothed. She used charcoal, burned twigs, and the ash from the hearth. Always the same shapes. A red horizon. A sky full of smoke. A figure, tall and distant, standing alone with a hand outstretched. The figure changed from one sketch to the next, sometimes with a helmet, sometimes a cloak. But the stance was always the same. As if calling something back that had already gone too far. He watched her once as she drew. The children slept nearby, curled together on a shared blanket. Her fingers moved slow, careful, as if remembering too clearly hurt more than she expected. He asked, "What's that place?" She paused, but didn't answer. He didn't press. Jonas wasn't the kind of man who went looking for truths that didn't want to be found. But curiosity, like rot, grew slowly in the quiet. The breakthrough came not from her but from static. He'd repaired the long-range radio weeks before, though he rarely turned it on. Most transmissions were cold military chatter or broken cries for help long expired. But that night, he heard a name. Commander Virilin, presumed dead, designated rogue if confirmed alive. Jonas froze. He glanced across the room. She was standing by the window, back turned. Still. Not stiff, not tense. Just still. Like someone trying not to exist too loudly. He lowered the volume. The broadcast faded. She didn't move. He waited. Finally, she spoke. "That's not my name." Jonas looked down at his hands. "I didn't say it was." A long silence passed. Then, softer, "But it used to be." That was all. She didn't elaborate. He didn't ask. The next morning, the children were up before either of them. The girl no more than 5 pulled Jonas's sleeve while he made tea. Mama had bad dreams, she whispered. He glanced at Lyrian. She was awake, staring at the fire, one hand clutched over her chest. Was she scared? He asked. The girl shook her head. She was angry. That evening, as snow piled high against the cabin door, Jonas sat across from her again. Between them, a half-burned sketch lay on the table. Not a planet. Not a battlefield. A face. His. He looked at it. Then at her. Why this? She didn't answer. But her eyes drifted to the children. Then back to him. And in that look, something old and breaking passed between them. Not trust. Not guilt. Recognition. She had once fought in the name of something that betrayed her. Now she was raising 2 children who didn't carry her blood, and sheltering in the home of a man who had once served on the other side of the war. But none of them said those words out loud. They didn't have to. The snow was loud enough. The first sign wasn't soldiers or ships. It was the silence on the emergency channel. Jonas hadn't heard the usual morning bursts of chatter from nearby settlements, weather warnings, fuel requests, the occasional lonely voice reciting poetry just to fill the static. All of it was gone. He tuned the frequency again. Nothing. Then, an hour later, the alert signal lit up, 1 blink, then 2. A coded warning from a long-retired medical comrade, buried beneath generic system traffic. 3 words, they are coming. Jonas shut the radio off and stared at the wall. Outside, the wind had softened. Inside, Lyrian was wrapping the youngest child in a red wool scarf. The girl giggled. She didn't know yet. Maybe she never would. Jonas walked to the back room, pulled open the locked chest beneath the floorboards. His medkit was there. A sidearm. 2 folded uniforms. 1 bore a name patch he hadn't seen in over a decade. He didn't suit up. Not yet. Instead, he found Lyrian by the hearth. She was watching the flame like it was speaking to her. They are coming, he said. She didn't ask who. She didn't flinch. Just looked up. Nodded once. Then she stood, walked to the corner, and opened the cedar trunk where the blankets were kept. She pulled out the red one. Thick, coarse. Military issue, faded from years of ash and soap. She wrapped it around both children, tucking them in close. The older child, 6, maybe 7, watched her face closely. Mama. Lyrian knelt. If I don't come back, she said gently, you don't wait. You live. The boy opened his mouth to argue, but her hand pressed against his cheek, firm and warm. Repeat it. He swallowed. Voice shaking. If you don't come back, we live. She kissed his forehead. Then the girls. Then she stood. Jonas stepped forward, breath caught in his chest. You don't have to go, he said. We can hide. Run. Her eyes held his. They'll burn the woods to find me. You know that. He did. Let me go instead. Say I turned you in. Say. She reached out. Not to stop him. just to rest her hand on his heart. "You gave me this," she said. "Don't make it small now." She turned to the children one last time. The scarf fell slightly from the girl's shoulder. Lyrian tucked it back in, slow and sure. Then she walked to the door. Outside, the sky was heavy. Tracks would vanish in minutes. She didn't rush. She walked like someone who had made peace with every step. The floor groaned behind Jonas as he moved to the window. He watched her become a silhouette against the whiteness. The boy pressed his face to the glass. "She's not afraid," he whispered. Jonas didn't answer. Because neither was he. Only angry. Angry that he'd found something worth saving too late to stop what was already coming. He turned. Found the red scarf. And held it, still warm with her shape. Outside, the trees swallowed her. The soldiers didn't arrive in a roar. They arrived in a hush after one. Snow muffled the sounds of boots, of metal, of intention. Jonas watched from the corner window, breath still, heart louder than footsteps. 5 figures. Matte armor. No flags. No insignia. Just pale visors and patient precision. They formed a loose line at the edge of the clearing, staring at the cabin like it was the last unopened chapter of a very old story. Jonas stepped outside. No weapon. No words. Just his presence. The tallest soldier raised a hand. The others stopped. "We're not here for you," a voice crackled through the speaker. Flat. Composed. "We're here for what you're sheltering." Jonas didn't move. Behind him, the door creaked. Lyrian stepped into the cold. No coat. No armor. Only the red blanket now worn as a shawl, draped across her shoulders like a banner long buried. Her feet left no sound in the snow. She stood beside Jonas, gaze steady. She said, "If I go with you, will you leave the children?" A pause. Then, "They are not on the manifest. We're not interested." "Not interested," she repeated softly. Jonas looked at her. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't tense. She was still. Still like the moment before a bird takes flight. Still like someone who has already left in her mind. She turned to him. "Keep them warm." That was all. He tried to speak, but nothing came. So he nodded. Once. The children pressed their faces against the window inside. The little girl's palm tapped the glass. The boy did not move. Lyrian walked forward. Slow. Measured. Her red shawl flared with the wind, a drop of defiance in a world of white. The soldiers didn't grab her. Didn't bind her. They only stepped aside, forming a corridor of silence she moved through like memory. Jonas didn't go back inside immediately. He stood there as the line dissolved into the woods again. As the trees swallowed red. And the snow fell again. Not heavy. Not loud. Just enough to cover the last of her footprints. 2 years passed. The forest stayed cold, but the cabin never went dark. Jonas built routines around small hands and growing shoes. He cooked meals that weren't rationed, taught the children how to name trees by bark and birds by song. The girl laughed more than the boy. The boy listened more than he spoke. But both slept soundly eventually. Some nights, the wind brought howls that were not wolves. When it did, Jonas would stoke the fire higher, just in case. They never came back for her. And he never left to find them. He kept the red shawl in a box beneath the floorboards, folded carefully beside a journal. Its cover was worn, the edges soft. The pages were filled with tight, slanted handwriting. No names. No places. Only thoughts. Only moments. One entry read: I was never made to be soft. But they rested on my skin like I was carved for them. So I stayed. Jonas read it sometimes when the children were asleep. Not to remember her but to remind himself she had been more than memory. The boy asked once, "Is she gone forever?" Jonas stirred the stew and replied, "Do you think fire disappears when it burns out?" The girl said, "No. It becomes smoke." Jonas smiled. Then watched the sky. She's always leaving us something. They called her mother still. Not because anyone told them to, but because when they touched the red cloth, they felt safe. And Jonas never corrected them. One winter, the boy older now, nearly a young man, stood at the edge of the clearing. The snow was falling again. He looked out and asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" Jonas didn't answer immediately. He joined the boy, eyes scanning the woods, not for shape, but for silence. Then he said, "If you're strong enough, you'll see her." "Where?" "In your hands. In how you hold the world." They went back inside. The door shut behind them. And the cabin, for all its quiet, stayed warm. Even as snow covered the roof. Even as her footprints never came back. She had already left something that could never be taken. And Jonas knew. That was enough. She didn't leave behind weapons. She didn't leave a farewell. She left a shawl. A journal. And 2 children who called her mom. Long after the world stopped remembering her name. Sometimes, love isn't loud. It doesn't knock. It simply stands between what you fear and what you protect. And sometimes, the most powerful mother in the universe isn't the one who gave birth, but the one who stayed. Thank you for watching UFO Love and Hate. If her story stayed with you, she's not gone. Not really.